Rofis sent me the G01 to review. That's exactly what we're going to do. It's got a simple on or off user interface or a momentary on option. It's got an intense beam and it's a blinding light. It also has a strobe mode and that's also very blinding. It can be solidly mounted onto a weaver rail and it looks pretty good on the firearm. My testing has shown that it puts out 700 lumens, can throw 166 meters, and has a hotspot of 6,886 candela, and it's pretty light at 70 grams or 88 grams loaded. I push out 700 lumens for about 30 plus minutes, and it only gets up to 48 degrees Celsius. You can light up trails, light up the field, light up sidewalks, using its high quality reflector, its Cree XPG2, on a copper MCPCB board, and that intense beam is second place compared to my medium to small lights. It's better than the Convoy S2 Plus, and is only beaten by the Xampler F1. And on the beam intensity profile, the G01 sits second best, only beaten by the F1. I have 3 pages of information here. You can pause it in any one of them and take a look at the finer details if you want. There's no low battery protection, and that's good because you don't want it to turn off automatically. Overall, I'd say it gives you good value for your dollar, and I'd rate it 4 out of 5 stars. It would have been better if it came with a good rechargeable battery, but I guess you can't ask for everything. So that was a quick introduction to this light. Stay tuned for the following 7 minutes if you want to see more review items. Then after that, there's a behind the scenes look at each one of those review items. We go into detail into how we tested it and how we rated it, and that's about 45 minutes long. So only stay tuned and watch that if you're really interested in this light. Otherwise, the next 7 minutes should give you everything you need to know about it. I received this product from Rofis to review. We have here the CZ75 SP01 Shadow. Awesome pistol. Let's throw it on here and check it out. We're clear. Let's slide that on. So it doesn't have anything to run into these locks. The bolt actually is below that and goes clear of it. So you can slide it up here and have it flush right there. But I'd rather have it back as far as possible, so I'm going to slide it back like that and then edge it up just a tiny bit so it's off that curve. So that's on there nice and tight. I don't think that's moving anywhere. It's very solid and I don't feel any play when I refund it with my thumb and stuff. That's on there really solid. It has no play at all like a lot of cheap mounts do. And you can mount something onto the bottom of this, a handle, laser, press it and then come back and do your proper hold. So it's not really meant for momentary on and off unless you have a handle here. Then you can easily hold on to the handle and flash it on and off. It's mainly for keeping on and then doing your proper hold and using your sights. And the cool thing is the center of the beam is right where your bullseye is. So there you go, that is the sight picture. Now let's do more testing on the current this pulls, the wattage, the beam shots outside. But first we'll take it to the range and test it out. The gun isn't that much heavier with it on there, and it doesn't change the way that it shoots. It doesn't seem to affect accuracy any, and it doesn't feel like it reduces recoil at all, but I'm sure it does a little bit because it does add some weight to the front of the gun. We'll slow it down so you can see the muzzle flip. It seems similar to the gun without the tactical flashlight on there. Now if you take a look at this fireball, it actually is touching the flashlight a little bit, and it does char the top of the flashlight a bit and ruin your anodization. So just keep that in mind if you're buying this flashlight. Since it sticks out beyond the muzzle, it's going to score away some of the anodization and make it look a little rugged. If you don't want that to happen, you'll have to get a flashlight that's even smaller and it sits behind the muzzle so it doesn't get exposed to that muzzle flash. Here's a look at that charring. It doesn't look too bad, but is sanding down or sandblasting that anodization basically. Alright, so I've got the Rofis here on the left and the on the road M3 on the right. So this lights up the trail quite well, lights up the entire path in front of you. It's a nice soft beam, so it's not super harsh or anything, and then it has a nice gradient out to the perimeter or peripheral. It throws quite a bit of light out to the sides, but it's not as wide as I'd like. But as you can see, it fills the entire camera view, not too bad. The M3 actually pushes more light to the peripheral. It has a wider peripheral angle, a wider field angle. This one has a nice tight beam though. My on the road is nice and warm, that's why it looks a little more natural, and then this one's kind of bluish. So the G01 actually has more punch. You see the bridge over there? You can see the foot of it, right? This one, you can't really see that foot. this one starts to lose its distance. So if you want intensity, this one definitely is the one to go with. And they're about the same size. So this is a very small light, and it is actually pretty damn powerful for an XPG2. I'd say it's matching up with the XML2, no problem there. And the XML2 is actually rated double. So there's the Rofis G01. Obviously it won't compete with the larger lights. Here's the Zanflare F1 on the right. I'll kick it up to turbo. It's a lot more intense than the M3 or G01, as you can see. So this one can't kick out that many lumens. This is like 1240, and it definitely looks a lot brighter. But once you get down to like high like this, that's the same as the G01, and the G01 can do it for like 20 minutes. So it's pretty much equivalent to the Zanflare F1 minus the flare mode. The flare mode's pretty awesome in the Zanflare, but you have to keep on double tapping it because it keeps dropping out of turbo. So it's not really a good mode. It's a temporary mode. It's good to have. So if you want flare mode, that's flare mode. And obviously the G01 is not going to compete against the L6. That just lights up the entire place like daylight. Look at that. It's ridiculous, really. G01, L6. Can't compete. But this one's a lot larger, so you're not going to be using this except for just like a baseball bat. So I guess Rofis liked my other review videos and they wanted to put this thing through the paces, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to subject it to the water test. We're going to check its beam profile, intensity, compare it to the other lights, and see how it does. I'm liking the build quality of it so far. The light output is not too shabby for an XPG, and is actually getting 75% of what the XML gets, so that is pretty good. And the XPG is actually a much smaller LED, and that thing is very tiny. That's what gets you the tight beam angle, which is required for a good spotlight. As you can see, this thing is easy to take off. I got it off in less than 30 seconds. The only thing about this is this thing is very hard to screw in and screw out. If you screw this in all the way, it actually takes quite a bit of force. So you'll probably just want to screw it tight like that and then leave it like that unless you're going into the rain. If you're going into the rain, screw it in all the way. I'll definitely tighten it completely up for the water test, but for the rest of the testing, I don't think it's necessary. The anodization is pretty good, and it doesn't appear to be scratched or scuffed from the initial insertion. So I think this is pretty good quality anodization. So that's a pretty quick summary of the light. If you want to stay tuned for the more technical review items, go ahead. It's going to be about 45 minutes long, so you might want to grab some popcorn or something. I think it's all pretty interesting, so definitely check it out if you think so as well. Now we're going to review in detail why each of these items are good, bad, or mediocre. So let's take a look at this thing and see how good it is. We're going to put it through all the tests that I typically do on my lights and see how this review product fares. So it comes in a standard box, nothing fancy, not as good as the Convoy S2 Plus things. Comes with a bolt to clamp this into a weaver rail and an O-ring for the back seal. There's already one on there, so this is an extra in case this one gets hard and rough. And it comes with a Panasonic CR123A lithium battery, non-rechargeable, so once you use this sucker up, it's toast. The good thing about the lithium non-rechargeable batteries is that they have like twice the amount of capacity, so the runtime of this will be a lot longer. The only downside to this is that it has high internal resistance, so you're not going to get the full lumens out of whatever flashlight you've got it in. So throw in a good rechargeable lithium-ion battery from Nitecore or Olight. So that's pretty tight seal. It's not going to leak any water, I don't think, but we'll find out in our underwater tests. This is a very simple operation. You just either momentary click on it to flash and do a quick flash. If you hold it down for longer than 1 second, it'll stay on. And then it's got strobe if you press again. and then to turn it off you hold it for longer than a second. Feels pretty heavy. It's made of pretty thick aluminum here. A lot of people don't like pressure switches because that wire will get caught on something and it'll get broken and it'll fail on you. But you either have a pressure switch or you have a fixed switch. Rofis has only designed this for an integral button, and they haven't made any ports or anything for you to add a pressure switch to it. Some lights do have a plug that let you put a pressure switch in there, but this one doesn't. Alright, so let's test it out and see how many lux it gets on the Lumen-o-Meter. 31.6. So that's not that good, but we'll throw in the proper lithium-ion battery, rechargeable, and see what it gets. I've got the on-the-road battery in my Lumen-top Elfin right now. This is pretty good light. Oh yeah, it's a lot better with the on-the-road. 96 lux. That is actually a lot for a small light like this. That's getting about the same rating as the Convoy S2 Plus in the warm whites. When they say 600 lumens, that's probably actually 700 lumens with this battery. So that's pretty impressive for a small light like this. That is a hot spot. So let's take a look at the LED. It's the Cree XP-G2, and that's a pretty good LED. It's not the newest one, but it's still a pretty good LED because it's very small and is well suited for throwers since it's a small light source. If you have a large light source, it's going to be very hard to focus down into a beam, so it's not going to be a very good thrower. That's why all the throwers have the smallest LED possible. And this one's a 3.5 by 3.5 millimeter LED. The XM series LEDs, like the XML2, XML, those ones are 5 by 5. So if you throw those into the same reflector, it's going to be bigger, your beam's going to be bigger, and you won't have such good focus. You're going to have a big beam and you won't get a nice laser beam of a thrower. The LED that they put in there is the S3, and it's about 6000 to 6500 Kelvin. It sits on a nice copper MCPCB board, and I think it's a direct thermal path because it performs very well on there. Let's compare the dome sizes of the XP-G2 versus XP-L2. It's the same form factor of LED, so it's the same size. The only difference is the technology and the dome that sits on top. As you can see, the G2 dome is a lot smaller than the L2 dome, and that helps it distribute a lot of the light forward, which is probably not what you want in a thrower, but that light's going to help you see into your peripheral and flood it out kind of to your sides. So if you look at this graph, Cree shows you that at 0 degrees, you've got 100% of your intensity. So right in front of the LED is going to be the brightest, and then as you move off to the side, the amount that it lights something up reduces lower and lower and lower. An angle that you kind of want to look at is 45 degrees because that's what your peripheral vision is going to kind of look out towards. So at 45 degrees you run your line up to the curve, and then you run it towards your percentage, and you see that it's around 75% or so. So the luminous intensity is measurable, and you can just measure it with a light meter and you'll get lux or foot candles, whatever it is. So if you're getting 10 foot candles straight ahead, at 45 degrees to the side, you'll get 7.5 foot candles. So that's pretty good. It lights up that area pretty well. Now it's interesting to note that the reflector is kind of at 90 to 45 degrees. So the light that hits the reflector is actually ranging quite a bit, and it's going to kind of average around 40%. So you could probably say 40% of your light goes into the reflector. So if you de-dome that, you'll probably get a lot more light into the reflector and then get more of a thrower. We can try that out later and try out the cone doming and de-doming of this thing, see how it changes its distribution. So if you overlay the L2 and the G2, you can see that the L2's dome is huge compared to the G2's. So this is just a sketch that I made. It's not a computer model or anything, so it's just to get the idea across. And if you test this out with your own LEDs and you swap your LEDs, you'll see that this kind of happens as well. So you've got your XP-G2 on your left. So you can see that the rays that come off that smaller source are more straight and they go straight down the middle. And on the XP-L2 side, on your right side, the dome is so big that it just kind of throws the rays everywhere wildly, and the reflector has a hard time focusing that straight down the middle. So the resulting beam is going to be a lot wider and it's going to be dispersed. As you get further away from the flashlight, it's going to get bigger and bigger. So it won't be a nice straight beam. So that's one of the reasons why the Rofis is such a good thrower, because of that smaller LED, smaller light source. You can focus it a lot easier. So there's different efficacy bins, and the S4 bin has the highest efficacy. It gives you 180 lumens when you push 350 milliamps through it. So unfortunately, they didn't put the S4 in there, which would have been awesome, but they did put the S3, which is second from the best. So it gives you 171 lumens at 350 milliamps. And most of the manufacturers do that to reduce the cost. The highest output bins are very rare, and they're actually pretty expensive. So second from the top is usually what you get. Unless you pay top dollar for the highest efficacy, you're not going to get the S4. The S3 bin is only 5% less than the S4 bins, and you'll probably not even notice it. So I think the light's around 6,000 Kelvin, so it's way beyond these higher color temperatures. But I'd say anything above 4,000 Kelvin is really white light. Anything above 5,000 Kelvin is going to start to turn a little bluish. And this thing is pretty blue at around 6,000. It's good for glaring people and lighting up the entire room. They don't tell you which bin it is, but I think it's probably above 5,000, even above 6,000 maybe. So 3B, 3A, beyond that. I'll just gloss over the chromaticity. Anything between 5,000 to 7,000 is pretty good. So I think this light could be somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 or more. If you're looking for a comfortable light, then 2700 Kelvin to 4,000 Kelvin is what you want. And it's more of a warm reddish light instead of a cool blue light. But for this application, I think 5,000 is great. And here's the spectral distribution of the XPG2. Ours is probably over 5,000 Kelvin, so it's that blue line. And as you can see at 600 nanometers, it's very low. So you're not producing much yellow or orange or reds. It's pretty much all blue light. So knowing that we're at the S3 bin, we have 171 lumens. You know you're pushing around 1.45 amps. And if you run that forward current up, you see it's 340%. You take 340% times 171, and you'll see that this is calculated to push out 581 lumens, which is 91 lumens per watt. Nothing groundbreaking, but that's a pretty efficient LED. And later in our testing, we actually calculate it pushes out even more than that in lumens. So when I threw in the on-the-road 700 milliamp hour battery, it looked like it was pushing around 700 lumens. I wanted to show you that your non-rechargeable lithium ion, the CR123A, only gives you 262 lumens instead of 700 lumens. It's because it has a much lower nominal voltage. Its voltage is only 3 volts instead of 3.7. So if you're going to use this light, definitely get your rechargeable lithium ions and put them in there. So if you only need 30 minutes of runtime, then the rechargeable lithium ions are great. They push a lot of lumens, use up a lot of power. As you can see here, they drop down quickly after 30 minutes. The non-rechargeable lithium ion has 3 volts going through it, and it keeps that voltage all the way beyond an hour. And then it starts to drop off after 10 minutes and then just dies after 30 minutes. Based on the purpose of this light, I don't see why you'd want to have runtime versus output. You probably want the high output, so put in a good lithium ion rechargeable in there. The G01 gets 700 lumens, so how does that compare to the rest of the lights? Let's take a look. It sits in the middle right in there with the UT01, which is a pretty bright light, but not super bright. It's a small everyday carry. It would have been better if it was a little brighter like the on-the-road M3, or even brighter like the Alphen or the S1R baton. But if we do a little modification to it, it could probably actually get up to that level. But if you consider this a critical application, you don't want it running as hot as an M3 or the S1R baton. The S1R runs so hot, it actually can't even sustain it for more than 30 seconds. And the turbo timer drops it down to high after 30 seconds. So it can only sustain output as much as the Rofis. So that's pretty impressive for the Rofis to be putting out 700 lumens all the time. So in this graph, we compare it to mostly 16340 lights. I threw in the 348 up at the top just to show you how much more powerful the 16340 lights are. And the best 16340 light that I have is the S1R baton, putting out 1049 lumens. That's a very bright light. The on-the-road can sustain 851, but it gets very hot. So I think 700 lumens is the sweet spot for a 16340 light. That's as powerful as you want it to be, because if it's any hotter, it's going to damage your battery and get way too hot. So it's as high as I'd want the flashlight if you want a stable flashlight. And if you consider this a critical application, then you definitely want it to be stable. Because when you go to press that button, you want to make sure it turns on. The on-the-road, the Alphen, and the S1R run pretty hot, so you could be damaging your battery if you leave it on for an extended period of time, and I wouldn't recommend running those on high for very long. So the max you want to run it is probably a minute. After that, it's going to get too hot to hold. So I think they've chosen a good amount of power to put towards that XPG2. Now if we compare the XPG2 to the rest of the lights, it sits a little bit below the halfway mark. But these other lights are much bigger than it, like the Xanflare F1, which is an 18650 light, or the U-Torch O2, which is a 26650 light. That's a way larger battery, way bigger body, and it only puts out 300 more lumens. So the G01 is actually pretty bright for its size. And then of course the multi-celled, multi-LED lights like the DQG, Skyray King, Convoy L6, those all blow everything else away. So I modified two lights, the S2 and the UTO2. I threw an XPL2 in there and put in a couple MOSFETs, and those things are pushing 16,000 lumens or 2,000 lumens. And those things are dangerously powerful. That's why they're not sold at that power level. But if you want 2,000 lumens out of a UTO2, just throw in the XPL2 and a FET, de-dome it, and you're good to go. That thing will be a monster thrower. I haven't finished all the testing on that one yet, but once I do, I'll put out the video as quick as I can, and hopefully that'll be an interesting and entertaining build video. I tested the current draw of this, and it pulls about 1.45 amps, and the rated current is 1.5, so it's almost at the rated current of the LED, and that means that it's driving it safely and not overloading it. So there's a bit of a safety factor there, and that's good for a stable light. It pulls about 6.09 watts. The runtime on a good 700 milliamp hour battery, like the on-the-road M3 battery, is around 29 minutes. And if you're strobing it, it'll probably run for about 59 minutes. Those are the only two modes. The parasitic drain is negligible, so you don't have to worry about that. Since it doesn't have a moonlight or low mode, its runtime is the worst out of all the flashlights, but since this is going to be mounted, it doesn't really matter. The Rofis actually has the second best maximum intensity of all the medium to small lights. It's only bested by the Zanflare F1, which has a smooth reflector as well, and much more light output. So that's pretty impressive for 700 lumens to be beating out the S1R, M3, everything else. It almost doubles their beam intensity. So what that means is it can punch out really far, and if you hit someone in the eyes with that, it will blind them twice as much. And then when you compare it to the larger, more powerful lights, it doesn't really compare. So if you want something that's really a thrower and something that's really blinding, you're going to have to upgrade to a C8, L6, or UTO2. The Skyray King, Zanflare, and DQG are pretty good, but they're not way brighter than the G01. So a light that creates a lot of glare is probably anything around 500 and up, but at 410 and 415, the Elfin and the UTO1 are still pretty blinding. So these are all fairly powerful lights. I converted the lux rating to candela, and then I converted candela straight to throw distance. So after doing that, you can see the throw distance for the G01 is 166 meters, and that's pretty good. Anything above 75 meters is probably pretty good. Like, look at on the sidewalk. It's throwing it out there. These are all pretty high-powered LED flashlights, and you can expect all of them to light up the sidewalk no problem. So I'll show you all these lights throwing down the sidewalk from the lowest to the highest throw distance, all the way up to 550, and you can see the difference in throw distance. The Elfin, the Convoy S2 Plus, the on-the-road M3, the S1R, the Rofis G01, Zanflare F1, Skyray King, Convoy C8, Convoy L6, and the U-Torch. So I'll quickly show you the beam shots at the field, and you'll be able to relate how the throw distance helps you see the building across the field. It gets brighter and brighter and brighter as your throw distance increases. So throw distance is based on your beam angle and the intensity. And if you want to pause it here and take a look at how I calculated the beam angle, field angle, and peripheral angle, you can do that. In this table, you see all the measurements I've taken. Let's compare it from the tightest beam angle down to the biggest beam angle. And here's the TOS-02, the upgraded UTO2. Look at this thing. 20 watts, 2,000 lumens approximately. Convoy C8 here, which is an awesome thrower as well. You can search back and forth in that building and see that green door. This is with orange peel reflector, and the center is still a little darker, and there's a kind of a donut halo-y effect there, or pattern. Alright, here is the Rofis G01, the light of the hour. Let's see how powerful this sucker is. Oh yeah, it's lighting up the building across the ways a little bit. And it can actually act as a searchlight going back and forth between those buildings. I think it's because of the narrow beam angle, the small LED pushing out all that light, and the high color temperature. It lights up right in front of us, kind of like the S2 Plus, a little bit brighter. And it is a pretty good searchlight, medium to near. And it's almost equivalent to the Zanflare. Well, it's getting up there. Let's compare it to the Zanflare F1. Here's the Zanflare F1, the G01. The G01 looks pretty bright. The Zanflare is just a little bit brighter. Not by much though. That's pretty impressive actually. It's because it punches a lot of that light out the front with that nice reflector, I think. Like look at that and that. That's very similar. This one's a little bit brighter, but that turbo's going to run out and it's going to drop down to high like that, and then at high. So that's high right there. The G01 is like the Zanflare's high, and it can sustain it for just as long. That's actually pretty impressive. See, in high, this thing can only light up the building a tiny bit, the same as the G01 here. M3 here, and it's basically the same thing as the S2 Plus. It's just a smaller version, less runtime, but it can light up the same type of area. Next up is the Skyray King. This is basically back to stock, not supercharged or anything, but there is a little bit of resistor jumping, so this is still a little more powerful than I think the stock Skyray King. And you can actually see that building, but you can't see that green door, but you can see the side of the building that's lightly colored. Any lightly colored stuff you can still see across the field. Maybe not so much on the camera, but with the naked eye or human eye you can see a little bit more. That's your Skyray King. Here's the S2 Plus. This is actually one of the warm white S2 Pluses, and it can't throw out very far, but it can light up right in front of you, and it's actually a very nice open distribution, very wide, and great for trail walking and sidewalks. You need medium to near usage. So look at that beam. It's nice and smooth. Good utility light, I call it. So let's take a look at the UT02. It's the best thrower, and it lights up that bridge down the ways, no problem. Here's the Convoy C8. It's a pretty good compact thrower. And then here's the Convoy L6, which is just a massive light. And because it has such high output, it can really throw even though its beam angle is kind of wide. And then we've got the Rofis G01, which has a similar beam angle to the L6, but has a lot less output, but does a very good job in throwing a lot of light down the middle. And then we got the Zanflare F1, which has a higher beam intensity than the Rofis and a wider beam angle. It just uses its higher lumen output to throw even further. And here's the On The Road M3, which has a wide beam angle, lower output, and that's why you can't light up the bridge as well. It's losing some of its punch or its throw ability. Then we have the Skyray King, which has 7 LEDs chucking a lot of light down a 20-degree beam, so it lights up that bridge and the entire trail no problem. And then we have the S2 Plus, which is a utility light, so it's not meant for throwing, and you can see that it's struggling to throw, kind of like the M3 does. And then we have the Olight S1R, which is similar to the Convoy S2 Plus. It has a hard time throwing light down the middle. It's more of a utility light and good for general uses. The beam angle is measured to 50% luminous intensity. So if you have a tight beam angle, you're going to light up that bridge no problem. The field angle is where it drops to 10% of the maximum luminous intensities. So if the G01 had 1300 lux in the middle, 10% of that's 130 lux. And the yellow circle here is where it drops off to 130 lux. So that helps you see off to your left and right. And then peripheral angle in my books is where it drops off to almost like moonlight levels. And this is an important figure because you want to be able to see into your peripheral, especially when you're walking down a trail like this. So the wider the angle, the better. The Skyray King does a very good job in throwing light off to the side. The S1R throws light off to the side, but it's not that bright, so it's not that useful actually. But I didn't want to discount it because it actually did throw light off to the edge. So all three of those parameters are important in a good light. You want a good beam angle, good field angle, and wide peripheral angle. I've graphed out the beam, field, and peripheral angles here for each light. So in this bar graph, you can see that the G01 sits kind of in the middle, leaning towards the thrower side, and I think that's the perfect distribution for this kind of light. And you also want that peripheral light so you can see off to the side. So if you measure the lux at 2.3 meters, you can punch it through the calculator. I'll leave a link in the description of where I calculated it. And we calculate that it has 6,877 candela. The rated amount is 4,665, so it's about 50% greater than what they rate. And it is a pretty bright light. And I think they underrated it because they used a poor 16340 battery. They didn't have the On The Road M3 battery, and that's the best 16340 battery I've ever seen. So that helped it get a very good output and good test scores for me. Candela is kind of hard to calculate because you have to throw it through that calculator, but I'll plot it out so you can see what it looks like. So all the measurements I took were in lux, and we can just convert that pretty easily. So I measured lux from the middle, worked my way outward, and then I plotted it, and I'm going to call that the beam intensity profile. Here's the curve of the beam intensity profile, and as you can see, Right in the middle, it just peaks up like crazy and then it slowly drops off and then quickly drops off. That's because they focus most of their light down the middle. That's how they get the super intense beam, because they're not wasting light off to the side. They're focusing it right into the middle. So the smooth reflector that they put in there is doing a very good job, and it's doing exactly what it was meant to do. Throw light straight down the middle and create a blindingly bright beam. So this diagram shows you the plus 90 degrees and minus 90 degrees from the flashlight. It's just measured 2.3 meters or 230 millimeters out from the aperture of the flashlight, sweeping from your left to the right. So it's not where it hits the wall, it's actually 2.3 meters all the way out to the sides and to the middle. So if we compare the G01's profile to the rest of the lights, you see that the Xanthler F1 towers over it, but the G01 towers over the U-Torch 01, the S1R, the S2 Plus, and the M3, and the Alphin. So if you want a good small compact thrower, this one is the best one you can get. I think they did that on purpose because when you mount it to your firearms, you want a nice compact thrower. This one gives you that without having the bulk of a C8 or something mounted onto your firearms. And of course, we've got to compare it to our larger lights. And as you can see here, the Convoy L6 dominates most of the lights. Only the UT02 can outperform the Convoy L6, and that's only right in the middle because of that powerful laser beam style UT02's beam. The Convoy C8 is trying to catch up to the L6, but it doesn't have enough output to do it, but it's pretty close. It gets 75% of the way there. So what I've done here is change the axis on the left to a logarithmic scale, and what that allows you to do is see the peripheral angle and field angle a lot better. See, look here, if you don't do that, you won't be able to see the peripheral angle because the lux rises so quickly. So we switch to logarithmic, and now you can see what happens out towards 90 degrees and negative 90 degrees. Now the G01 does a very good job focusing the light down the middle, but when it takes that light and focuses it down the middle, you're losing the spill light out to your field angle and peripheral angle. That's why at 20 degrees to 90 degrees it has a lot less light. So that's what you sacrifice when you create a good thrower out of a 700 lumen light. You're taking that light from your field angle and peripheral angle and throwing it straight down the middle, so you're not going to have a lot of light out to your sides. But still, as you can see in the field and in the trails, it still has enough light out to the sides for you to light it up or see anything important. So it's kind of a balancing game, and I think they've got it right, because you don't want a much bigger light and you don't want the center beam to be any weaker. Like, you wouldn't want to decrease your beam intensity and then throw more light out to your peripheral, because your main focus is going to be right in the middle. So they put that light where your priorities are. Focus right in your bullseye. So I tested it for flickering, and on 100% on mode, it's actually kind of like a FET driver. It doesn't buck to limit current or anything, so that's good to know. And just based on the different lumen outputs on different batteries, you know it's based on the internal resistance of the battery and the whole system. So it's acting like a FET driver. And we've got to test the water resistance of all our lights. The way I do that is throw it into a bucket of water, turn it on full, let the battery die, and then let it cool down. When it cools down, it sucks in the water if the seals are no good. Usually the battery cap pulls in some water. I'll explain the IP rating. So IPX6. So the X just means they don't have rating, and then the 6 means that it resists powerful water jets. So I think that's kind of like a pressure washer. And if it can resist a pressure washer, it should be able to resist some water ingress in a little tub. So we're going to do the water test. I'm going to put around this much water in it, and that'll give it some pressure so that the water can try to force itself into the flashlight and break the seals and get inside there. So it'll be a good test to see the amount of pressure it can handle from the water ingress. We're going to run the on-the-road M3's battery in there. We've got our seal. I put a little bit of silicone on there because you need some silicone to allow it to spin easily. Otherwise it gets pretty hard to twist in. So we haven't taken this apart yet. Let's throw it in the water, turn it on full, let it run out completely, let it cool down, and then see if water gets in there. We'll dry the exterior and then take it all apart and see if any water got inside there. So the battery's starting to die here, and now let's take it out and take a look at this thing. The G01 has done its water test. Let's dry it out. Let's open it up and see what's inside. So it's all dry now. Let's see if there's any water inside. There is some water inside. So it looks like a little bit of water got into the battery compartment. So the heating up and cooling down of the flashlight is what causes the water to get sucked in, and I think a lot of the flashlights cannot stop that because the O-ring is just not being compressed well enough, but that is probably pretty normal for any of these flashlights. So obviously not good for submersion, but it'll be fine for rain and getting splashed on or hosed down or something. There's no water at the front, so it only seeps in a little bit through the back when it cools down, and that's why the battery gets a little wet. But since it didn't keep the water out from the tail cap, I give it a grade of a D, and I'm going to say that it's more like an IPX5, which is only good against light water jets like a garden hose or something. So this light is not super water resistant, but it's not bad if you're going to be in the rain or something. So now let's take this whole thing apart and see what it's like inside. I'm pretty impressed by its performance, so hopefully it's built well and built to last. I'm going to try to take apart the front of it and see if any water got in there. So let's wrap it in some rubber, crank down on it, and see if we can get this thing open. I think we're going to have to, that's pretty tight, we're going to have to put this thing in a vise. So we got the head loose. It just takes a lot of force to get that off. I must have used some sort of a thread lock or something. There we go. There's absolutely no water inside there, and the thread lock is all over the place, but the seal stayed true and did not let any water in. There's the lens against the metal, and then the O-ring has a nice little recess in the lens, so it sits in there and creates a good seal between the body, lens, and reflector. And there's also an O-ring at the front threads, so no water got in there because that was cranked on there very nice and tight. And this piece slides right out, just like that, perfectly. And that's the little button. So the rubber button just sits against there, like that. I'm surprised no water got in through this rubber button because it's not really being compressed against the case. It's just kind of, this thing slides over it. Maybe when it slides over it, it presses down on it a little bit. But that's some pretty nice machining. And this thing has a slot so it doesn't rotate once you slide this in. So it's pretty easy to take apart. And this is pretty nicely made actually. The positive lead is so short that you've got to desolder it, take it apart. And there's a nice 2-part driver in there. I think this piece even just, well, it's all soldered together, so I shouldn't pull it too hard. The tail is pretty good, it's standard, doesn't have a bypass spring or anything, but it works fine the way it is. So I'm seeing some rust happening on this bolt. The rest of it seems fine. If you replace that with a stainless steel bolt, it would be a lot better. So if you expect to get this wet, replace that with a stainless steel bolt, and you should be fine. And I think an M420, the 20mm long one here, fits perfectly right there. But it's a little bit longer than 20mm, so maybe like 23 or 24. Let's see if this one still fits. Oh yeah, no problem. So that's a quick upgrade you can do to it. Throw in your stainless steel M420. It's stainless steel, won't rust. I think this one is just a steel one, not stainless steel. Let's look up the grade of this one and see what it actually was. Okay, so it said 12.9 on it, and that's an alloy steel, quenched and tempered. So it's not a stainless steel bolt, it's just normal steel. We've replaced it with an A2-70, which is a 304 stainless steel bolt. so it's going to be corrosion resistant and won't get that rust if you get it wet. So that's a pretty cool upgrade. Definitely do that if you intend on getting this thing wet. Here's a copper MCPCB board, and that's great for keeping the LED cool. It lets you drive it hard and run over 700 lumens out of this thing. So it'll keep that LED cool, make it reliable, and it won't fail on you anytime soon. So Rofis has done a good job by putting a copper board in there. It'll pull all the heat away. This is not your everyday driver. It's got an inductor on there, there's a capacitor, it's got the controller. It looks like it was meant to last. It's not just one cheap controller and a current limiting resistor. So this is a high quality driver, and they put some good thought into this. It's not just something cheap thrown together and throw the word fire on there. This thing is a good quality product. You're paying a little bit more for this, but I think you're actually getting your money's worth. Check that out. You've got the pass-through holes there, so your positive and negative terminals are nice and solidly connected to your driver. That lets you put a lot of current into it, and that's why it lights up the field the way it does. If you want to upgrade this thing, you can replace the XPG with an XPL2, but since it's a larger LED, you might actually reduce the beam intensity at the center point. But since it has a lower forward voltage, you might actually push a little more wattage, so you might actually make up for it. So you can upgrade this, give it more power, more light. Definitely has the potential for it. I saw a current limiting resistor on the other side, so you could probably replace that and make it more powerful too. But since 16340 batteries aren't that good, don't expect to be pushing too much more than it already is. These XPL2 LEDs could actually put out 2000 lumens each, but you need a pretty good VTC Sony 18650 battery or something. So we've done that in our Convoy S2 Plus and our UTO2. It has a good amount of thermal paste on there, so it'll keep it nice and cool. So they've also gone that extra mile. We'll go from the front to the back. So take a look at these threads. They're good quality threads, and they're not cheap like those $6 flashlights. They put a lot of permanent thread lock on here, so that thing's not coming apart on you. The cheap lights are going to come undone and they're going to come loose. The lens seems pretty thick, and it has an anti-reflective coating on there, as you can see, and that'll allow your light to pass through there and not get lost. That's how it has that super high output. Standard O-rings, and what they've done to the reflector is similar to what the guys at U-Torch have done. They put a little recess in there, so you can get that O-ring right in there, and it'll clamp down, seal between the glass, the reflector, and the head. So no water got through there in our test, and that's pretty good because it got through the tail. But the tail doesn't have as much compression as this, and no water got in the head, even though it did get in the tail. Now if you take a close at this reflector, it's top notch. Look at how smooth that is. Doesn't get any better than that. Make sure you don't touch it, and don't wipe it. Anything you do to this lens will scratch it. If you got to clean it, just clean it with water and soap. Don't rub it. Just spray it down, and then air dry it. Try to blow it with some compressed air, and then just let it air dry. That thing will get damaged, because this is pretty much perfect. When they say 99% reflectivity, this is it. And this is how they achieve that high beam intensity that's better than lights even pushing out 1000 lumens. This is a good reflector. And it's good that it uses a domed LED, because then you've got some floodlight going out there as well. So this light is a combination of a nice hot beam plus good flood lighting, so you can see into your peripheral. If you're running around, you need peripheral light, and it's great to have that super tight beam so you can focus all that light down where you need it. You see those two wings sticking out to the side? It pushes right against that piece of metal, and if you do drop it, it takes all that impact. It doesn't put the impact right on the driver itself. And then all of that fits into this nice body that they've designed. They're pushing the LED source further up, closer to your barrel. And that's perfect for a pistol, because then it's going to be closer to your point of impact and aligned with your barrel. And look at that, they pushed it up so high that they had to go and they had to offset that positive terminal, so when you slide that in, it's perfectly centered with your battery. The tail is pretty good. It's got these nice square cut threads, super smooth machining. It's not all grindy and gritty and sanding itself down like those cheap flashlights that you can get online. And they're going to produce something cheap for you, and you put it together and it's all cross-threading and grinding and all that garbage. This is a good quality flashlight. You screw that in, you'll feel it's nice and smooth. It's something that you want to mount and never take off. If you get the cheap ones, you're going to mount them, and then you're not even going to want to keep it on your gun. You kind of want to take it off because it feels like garbage. So Rofis has done a good job. Thank you for sending this to me so I could actually see how good it was. I was a little apprehensive at first, and I didn't think it would be this good. I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can with my review. And as you can see for yourself, these parts look pretty awesome. They fit together well, and they're meant to last. Except for the bolt here, which rusted on me, but you can replace that with a stainless steel one. So now let's put it all back together. So after taking this thing apart, I'd say it's pretty well made. The aluminum and the machining seem good enough that I'd say this is a high quality product and not a cheap knockoff or anything. The threads in the front are anodized, and they've used a lot of thread lock to keep the front head on. So this thing will never come apart unless you use two big tools to twist it apart. That tells me that this was made to last. And then the tail cap threads are square cut. They're pretty beefy, and they don't get all grindy like cheap flashlights do. The driver is interesting. They've used one PCB board just for the contact for the battery, and then they've separated it from the rest of the board, which has all the components on it. That's so that if you drop it, the components don't get broken, and the thing can keep functioning. So this shows me that it's really robust, and it was made to last. This thing should survive on a firearm, even if you smash it around quite a bit, but you shouldn't be smashing around your firearms anyway. And of course that LED sits on that copper board, which is awesome. And I noticed there's a little notch on the 12 o'clock position to keep it from rotating. That ensures that the conductors don't get crushed if you accidentally turn that board a bit. And around the positive terminal, I don't know why they cut out that big piece. I don't think it'll affect the thermal dissipation too much, but it does help you pull the driver board out easily if you have to. It looks like they did it just to be stylish. The tail cap isn't super thick, but I think it's good for what it is. I wish they used a spring, kind of like the UT02. That would have been good because it would have reduced the internal resistance more, and it would have allowed this light to push out even more lumens. You could probably add some copper braid to that if you want, and hopefully increase the output that way. So the thing I like most about this light is that high quality reflector. It's smooth and it throws that light down the middle like I've never seen any other reflector do. So if you're looking for a very powerful thrower in a compact form factor, this is the one to get, because it outdoes all of my other lights, and those are powerful lights. I would have never thought that this thing could do that. So the water resistance of a lot of these lights is actually falling short of my testing and my expectations. A lot of them suck in water, like the UT02, which sucked in water through that USB charge port. But maybe my test is too harsh for them, but you're going to have to pass that test if you want your flashlight to have a good water resistance rating. One unfortunate thing is that the 12.5 grade steel bolt rusted on me, and if you don't want that to rust, you're going to have to replace it with a M4 24mm or something. Another bad thing, or a good thing, is that it doesn't have low battery protection. Since this light is supposed to be on firearms, I'm going to say that this is a good thing, because you don't want that thing automatically turning off when you want the light. You want it to use the last ounce of juice in your battery if you want to use it. I don't want the programming telling me that I can't have light. If you want to protect your battery, just get something like the Night Core, which has a protection circuit on it. You lose a little bit of capacity though, so I still recommend the 700 mAh battery. I don't know where you can buy the On The Road M3 battery right now, but if I find out, I'll put a link in the description. Otherwise, just get your standard Night Core, O-Light, whatever you want. Just make sure it's a good brand and has true output. Don't get anything with the word fire in the name. Those things usually have half the output or a quarter of the output that they state. So you're not going to use this for tail standing, but it can actually kind of stand on its tail if you need to use it as a light like that. Now the driver is specifically built for the G01, but it looks like you can modify it to make it have more current delivery just by jumpering the current limiting resistor. And you can replace the G2 with the L2, but I don't recommend doing any of these modifications because you don't want the light to burn itself out and you want to maintain that hotspot. You don't want increased output and a decreased hotspot. But if you're really keen, you could de-dome it or even cone dome it and make it a thrower still. Because increasing the output of this light can increase the risk that it fails, and that's not something you want. But if you really want to do it, the XP-G2 has the exact same footprint as the XP-L2. And that's because they're part of the XP family, and Creed did that on purpose so that manufacturers could swap out the different LEDs without changing their process too much. So they're 3.3 by 3.3mm pads. And if you do put in the XP-L2, since that dome is bigger, it has that wider beam like I was showing before. Traditionally, you de-dome and just make a flat dome, and as you can see on the right, if you have a flat dome, a lot of that light gets thrown out to the side and straight down the middle. The problem with having a flat dome is that a lot of your light is still going out the front, so you're losing 30% of it right there. It doesn't go down the beam. So what my testing and my prototyping has shown is that the cone throws the light out to the sides, hits the reflector, and more of that goes straight down the middle. I haven't done extensive testing on it yet, but once I do some controlled testing on it, I can confirm how much better or worse that is than a flat dome. I just have to get around to detailing out the tests. There's no thermal management on this, but since it's only 6 watts and the body's pretty big, It only gets up to about 48 degrees in our testing. So here's the lumen output graph with the temperature graph. As you can see, with the 700 milliamp hour battery and the high output, it gets up to 48 degrees Celsius, but then the output starts to decrease because the voltage decreases, and then your temperature starts to slowly drop off. With the non-rechargeable, the output is only 200 lumens, and the temperature only slowly rises to around 35 degrees. And when the battery is starting to run out of energy, it starts to heat up, and that's what caused the spike up to 44 degrees Celsius, which is pretty interesting to see. So make sure you use a rechargeable battery if you want 100% of the lumens. I've tested it to around 700 lumens, but anyone using this light's going to want it to be putting out at least over 500 lumens. So throw a rechargeable RCR123A in there and make sure you get that full output. You definitely don't want to use the non-rechargeable unless you don't care about output at all, because at 267 lumens, that's not much. The peak that I've tested it to is about 714, which is pretty good. And of course, the weight of the flashlight is important because it's supposed to be a compact flashlight you can mount to the bottom of your firearm. If it's too big and heavy, that's an issue. Empty, it's 70 grams, which is pretty heavy, and then with the battery, it's around 88 grams. It's a lot lighter than the S2 Plus and the F1, which is good, and exactly what you want on your firearm. In comparison to the UTO2, Skyray King, and L6, there's no comparison. Something like the L6 is so heavy that you're actually going to be mounting your firearm onto the flashlight. I'd say that the G01 gives you great value for your dollar. Everyone works hard for their money, and spending 40 bucks on something that's a piece of garbage and not engineered well is not something you want to do. But I've taken this thing apart, and you could probably agree with me that this is a well-made product, performs really well, has a great beam intensity, can light up that field, light up the trail no problem, light up within your home very well, and has good blinding power. If you're looking for a good light to mount onto your pistol, this one's the one to go with. If you buy anything else for $26 or something, it's not going to function very well. It's going to feel kind of like a piece of garbage, and you're not going to want that mounted on your firearm. So I'd rate this 5 out of 5 for value for the dollar. If you want a good quality product that performs, the G01's the way to go. So it's meant for being mounted on the bottom of a firearm, and I think the design is well suited to that, because they've pushed that LED high up as they can towards your barrel, and that's what you want. There's no adjustments, but they've designed it so that the beam shoots straight down your bullseye. So that's the purpose of this light, and it does that very well. It mounts solidly to the weaver rail, and it doesn't move around one bit if you crank down on that screw. The operation of it's simple. You push the button, it turns on. You hold the button, it stays on. So it's geared towards staying on. So that's well suited to a high-speed pressure situation. When you need light, you want light. The driver also has that second PCB board to keep it robust and make sure that it works when you need it to work. So in conclusion, if you're looking for a good pistol light, this is the one to go with. So as a disclaimer, Rofis sent this one to me for free for my review, but they didn't tell me or expect me to give a good review for this product. I went into this not knowing how good this product actually was. If this light was built cheaply, you would have seen that in this review, but upon taking it apart and inspecting all the parts, it's definitely proven that it's a good product, performs well, and is worth every penny, and deserves to be mounted to your firearms. So I hope you enjoyed that quick review video. Thanks to Rofis for sending that in for my review. If anybody else thinks their products can stand up to my review and scrutiny, definitely send them in as well. Again, thanks to all my subscribers and viewers. You guys are 100% of the reason why I make these videos, and if nobody was watching them, I would stop making them. But since you guys like my videos, I'm pushing all the testing further, pushing the modifications further, and hopefully we make some groundbreaking discoveries together. So definitely put in your comments. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your ideas, and your ideas is what keeps this thing going. And 90% of my video content is viewer driven. Thanks for watching, and I hope that helps.